Following your suggestion, I've continued to read through The Lord of the Rings and make comments about it. And also, this is kind of associated with something that I'm doing with the Old Norse myth class that I'm teaching on Zoom, because we go through these Old Norse texts, especially the poems of the Poetic Edda, and read them with a fine-tooth comb. We spent 3.5 class days on Voluspa. That's what, 10.5 hours on it. But the poem Voluspa, the first poem in the Poetic Edda, contains a list of names of dwarves. Now, this is really interesting because there's actually multiple different attestations of this poem. It occurs in the manuscript Codex Regius, Koningsbok, GKS 23654 Quarto. It occurs in the manuscript Høgsbok, and it is quoted by Snorri Sturluson in his prose Edda in several different medieval manuscripts. So we have multiple different attestations, all with this long list of dwarf names. And J.R.R. Tolkien took names of... Is that ice?
No, it's mice.
It's cool. We have ice here that's also forming on these concretized minerals from the hot springs here in Thermopolis, Wyoming. So he took a bunch of these dwarf names and he made them the names of the dwarves in The Hobbit, right? So Thor and Oakenshield, those are actually two different... Thorin and Akenskeld are two different dwarves. Fili, Kili, Bombur, Nori. These are all from actually one particular manuscript of the prose Edda and its version of the dwarf names list, because the names vary a little bit from list to list. But one name that's in all of the versions of the list is Gandálfr. Now, Olvr means elf, so it's not only surprising that Gandalf's name occurs in the list of dwarf names, but that his name contains the word elf. Now, whether there's a difference between dwarf and elf in Old Norse, very, very unclear. I subscribe to Ármann Jakobsson's view. Ármann Jakobsson, top scholar in Reykjavik. We've done some interviews with him, including one where he talks about this. But he takes elf, Olvr, to be essentially a good supernatural being that's not a god, right? So a lesser supernatural being, not a god, but also not evil, because the evil equivalent of that is troll. So then dwarves are just a vague category within that even vaguer, bigger category. The main characteristic of dwarves does not necessarily seem to be that they're short, but rather that they have some kind of magical association with, like, actually, honestly, weirdly, shape-changing is a big deal with dwarves in Old Norse myth. They often seem to be associated with smithing, with making stuff. They probably are short, but that doesn't seem to be their principal characteristic. I have a whole video about whether dwarves are short. Anyway, so elf and dwarf seem to be roughly the same thing, or at least both are very vague terms for a lesser supernatural being that's not evil. The Gandr part is the same word that's in Jormungandr, the name of the serpent that encircles the earth. It's just another very vague word associated with magic, monsters, the supernatural. So more or less, Gandalf's name means like magic elf or something like that, but it's the name of a dwarf in that list. The name also occurs elsewhere. There are people named Gandalfr in our Old Norse sources, including one king of Vingulmörk, a region of Norway that's around modern-day Oslo, that occurs in the Norwegian king sagas. So that's just a little note about Gandalf for you folks out there. Hoping to offer that myth class again once this current session is done. That'll be probably mid-2025 by then. And of course, watch for more of the read through the Lord of the Rings videos, because I'm doing those in fairly rapid succession right now. All right. Well, from beautiful Wyoming, we're wishing you all the best.